All right. Welcome. You are listening to Gnostic Studies, and we'd like to continue our Gnostic Runology series this is the 5th class of Gnostic Runology on the Reit or Rita Rune. But before we do that, we want to do the review that we like to do before each class. The review of the previous material. Let's see. Here it is. Okay, so in the previous class, we studied the Os and Othil runes. Sometimes they're collectively referred to as Olin, O-L-I-N or double L. And as usual, we looked at our historical authors first, and then we went into our Gnostic and Rosicrucian authors. So Fischbach says that its meaning is breath, and that it's related also with the Asir. It means A and O. It can be either one depending on the word, A or O. So it could be a O word like Odem, which means breathing or breath. Asir, Asen, Osen, divinities related with the East, Osten, Agni, fire. And it is similar to the fire rune, the first rune that we studied, the Fa rune, except it's it's got a pole, a central pole, and then it's got two angled arms, and they're pointing down, whereas in the Fa rune, the first rune, they're pointing up. All right. In second, we have Guido von List, 1907. The first one was from 1900. He says it's related to the gods, the mouth, emergence, ash tree, and ashes. The power of speech, which passes through the mouth. Spiritual power working through speech, power of suggestion, shatters the shackles and gives freedom. In the struggle for existence, it's always those who develop their moral force who remain permanent victors. With the disappearance of morality, the higher spiritual position is also lost. Therefore, your spiritual force makes you free, is the motto he has for this rune. All right, I just had to turn up the mic there. Something was wrong with it. Next, in 1924, about 15 years later, Kurtzahn, exoterically, he says that it's related to emergence. Esoterically, to origin, ace. And generally to the mouth, ash tree, and ashes. He says the meaning of the rune is the mouth. And he also mentions the power of speech. But speech alone is basically unable to do it. We need action. Speech and action combined together. The fetters or the shackles mentioned in the rune song will only fall as a result of a boldly uttered battle cry, which is followed by actions. The time for dialogues is over. As Goethe says, in the beginning was action. Gorsleben, about 6 years later in 1930, says that it is related with the noble leader or guide, Odin. It has the concept of the mouth of God, in which the word is at rest, not yet born. Because Os is the unborn suitor, yet to be born. The Ur word gebotens, meaning that which is offered as well as advisable, desirable, worthwhile. This I know as a fourth, when an enemy throws shackles or fetters around my hands and feet, if I sing the song, then the ties fall from the legs, and the imprisonment falls from my hands. It's the rune of nobility, the mouth, origin, ace, birth, branch, ash tree. But in the reverse meaning, it can also mean carrion, which is rotting flesh, and ashes. Not only does it refer to the mouth, but it can also refer to the genitals and the female womb, which gives birth. Ostar, which is related with Easter, he says means the mouth or womb, and to procreate, procreation of the earth in springtime. So Os is the rune of speech. He says that if the Fa rune is the phallus, the first rune, then the Os rune is the womb. All being arises from the maternal source of love, and the unfolded world withdraws again into the maternal womb after the eons in order to rise again to a new sequence of creation. In eternal change between being and non-being, fertilized by the male spirit, the breath of God, right? Os, origin of all. God's breath became this world, and if God inhales or draws in his breath, then the world does not exist anymore. It returns to the one, into himself, into God, into nothing, in quotation marks. So the Os rune and the Od rune, or Odil rune, which is also the Othil rune, is the rune of the spirit, of breath, or of breathing force, of Wotan, Odin, Odem, Adtem, Atman, and great forces are attributed to it. Knowledge of how to produce this force reveals to us the shackle-breaking power mentioned in the rune song. Thy spiritual force, thy greater ethicality, sets thee free. However, speech alone is not enough. The word must be followed by action. We can see here he's putting together a lot of the ideas mentioned by other authors. He says another significance of this rune is spiritual salvation. Excuse me. The nobility rune, the leadership rune, the fire or crossing rune is the origin of the number 4 in its shape. In heraldry, there is nobility referred to in the shape, as well as priestly lineage. The shape of this rune, because it's in the shape of a headband that was worn by the priests. Both the Os and Othil runes denote families in which important things were and still are achieved with speech, with the power of the word, whether through trade, science, or in teaching. Kummer summarizes a lot of what the other authors said. He says, what is conceived or generated through spirit and love becomes action. Os is the rune of spiritual speech, of persuasion and conviction, of might, of language, of spiritual linguistic power. Through spiritual procreation, with which one convinces and overcomes all brute force, every force can be conquered. It is begotten through strength. It is begotten spiritual strength, which breaks all physical fetters or shackles. Everything lower is destroyed because the spiritual word is also followed by action. That is why the rune song says, from word, word develops into word, but actions lead to actions. The Os rune is also the Othil rune, the rune of breath, life breath, world breath, the odes, the Odin Wotan rune, the rune of spiritual salvation, of nobility. Odin, the ode bringer, who brings the child. The Ur fire is symbolized by the divine trinity, life, breath, light, and heat. In the language of the ancestors, breath is synonymous with spirit. Without the breeze, no fire burns. Without breath, there is no life. The inverse or demonic of the Othil rune occurs through improper creation or generation. Then wisdom and spiritual salvation sinks into darkness, the darkness of the Ur. Protect yourself from it. He gives two exercises. One for the Othil rune, spread the legs, put the hands on the top of the head, hands together, arms on top of the head, palms facing each other, and the fingers pointed upwards. Vocalize O. And the Os position, which he does with an arm and a leg. To the east with the left arm and leg, and then turn to the north with the right arm and leg, and in this case, Os is the mantra. He gives a hand grip, rune grip or mudra, putting the thumb and the pointer finger together to make a circle. Mantra is O. Oops, this is the wrong one. Let's see if we can add it real quick. Boom. Sorry about that. Then we have, according to Huiracocha, he says the Os rune is under the influence of Scorpio. And like the Fa rune, which has its arm upwards, the Os rune has its arms downwards in a similar way. This rune is complemented with another, which is the Othil or Odil rune and the Olin symbol in Mexico, both of which represent movement. So after having placed the arm at the waist in the Dorn rune position, place both arms down and sideways, and then both arms at the waist to complete the mantram, saying Thorn. Thorn. If we remove the N, then it becomes Thor, Tor, Door, door in English. This rune is the door that opens for the attainment of internal powers. Let it be well understood that the door is opened if we have charged ourselves with willpower and with what we call persistence or insistence. So the exercise that he has is different, right? He says you combine the two together. Arms to the side, not arm and a leg like Kummer did, and then arms at the waist. Not above the head. Olin in Aztec is the sign of Quetzalcoatl, god of wind, god of life, and thus Olin is the rune of respiration. Therefore, you have to charge yourself, inundate yourself with air, with life, with prana, aspirating through the nose and then exhaling the breath while saying the mantram, Torn. Armed then with willpower, right, from this rune. And while concentrating on creating magical forces, once inhaling, the air is retained in the lungs each time while you do an affirmation. So you stand in, I'm telling you how I understand it, right? You can interpret it how you want, but this is how it's been practiced. Arms, feet together, arms out to the side, to the left side, parallel to each other. Inhale. Then while you hold your breath, you say, I am all power, all will, and all movement. You say it to yourself internally. The thorn and movement runes are realized in me. Or, all power, all will, and all movement are realized within. The thorn and movement runes are realized within. From this moment on, the disciple must impose their will, feeling capable, powerful, making whatever they wish prevail, without hurting others, without ceasing to be kind and affectionate to all. But from the whole of our being, there must be something imperative, so that others say, this person is strong and knows how to command. One should never say, I cannot do this or that. Instead, one must say, I can. If the magical runic value of the Thorn or Dorn rune is 3, or the Trinity, then the Os rune is represented by 4, and thus these two runes form the septenary. They work together, they're a pair. The two together represent, as we have said, willpower, action, as well as the all, but also death and reincarnation or return. The lap or bosom or womb, the mouth, the Christ as logos, as well as oration, speech, and respiration, breath, breathing. The disciple must meditate on these practices, which are composed of a septenary or the 7 bodies, one encased within the other. And that one's breath and respiration must permeate them all at the same time. In the interior, this produces something like an amalgam, in such a way that the air goes to each of the corresponding bodies. That is to say, some more material, others more subtle, so that the air acts and drives itself into all our vehicles, bringing the cosmic Christ to us and leading us to our divine origin, from which we have departed, and to which we must return. But before this becomes possible, we must try to act on our physical organism, on our body, which is our instrument, by using the practices and exercises that have been carefully guarded for centuries by the secret and initiatic societies, among whom the Rose-Cross fraternity has always excelled as a guardian of runic magic. And finally, Samael and Weor. He says, we must profoundly study the problem of sexual transmutation for single people. The medicine against the subjective states that produce nocturnal pollutions is sexual magic. Yet there is need for clarification. While we remain very alive, in other words, while we remain with the ego existing in the 49 regions of the subconsciousness, then erotic dreams will inevitably continue. What occurs is that through the practice of the Sahaja Maithuna, sex yoga, white tantra, the chela or disciple becomes accustomed to refraining the impulse, and thus, when an erotic dream occurs, the mind instinctively refrains the sexual impulse. Clearly, such a formula helps when one has continuity of purpose. Thus, daily practice is needed year after year with intensity. Unfortunately, this formula only works when one has a spouse. But what about those who are single? Then what? Those who are single can and must utilize the creative energy for the awakening of the consciousness. What we need to know is the technique. So let us enter in full into the field of the R-Rune. This rune vibrates intensely with the constellation of Scorpio, which is very important because Scorpio is related with the sexual organs. This is the same Olin rune of Aztec Mexico, and it is esoterically related with the famous thorn rune. Among the Aztecs, Olin is the mystical symbol of the god of the wind, the lord of movement. The name of the corresponding angel is Ehecatl. He was the one who intervened in the resurrection of Jesus by transmitting prana, life, into the body of the great Kabir, saying, Jesus, rise with your body from within your tomb. The angel Ehecatl, the god of wind, is certainly an extraordinary Guru Deva who lives in the world of conscious willpower and has power over the sylphs of the air. So now we can see the intimate esoteric relationship between the Os and Thorn runes, movement and willpower. In the sacred land of the pharaohs, the Sphinx, corresponding to the elemental Sphinx of nature, who is the mysterious instructor of the Holy Devic College. All the Gnostic brethren would like to talk face to face with that elemental Sphinx, to have a dialogue with the Devas, or to walk with Ehecatl. But in order to do so, it is necessary to awaken the consciousness, to open the door, to call with persistence or insistence, to set our willpower into motion or movement. Observe very carefully the two diagrams of the Os runes. In the same way that the Fa rune has its two arms upwards, the Olin rune has them downwards. This is profoundly significant. Practice. During these esoteric practices, there is a need to successively alternate movements by placing the arms in the first position, sideways downwards, then in the second position, arms placed at the waist, as in the Dorn or Thorn rune, but on both sides. You must combine the movements with harmonious and rhythmic breathing. Inhale the prana through the nose, exhale it through the mouth with the mystical sound Thorn, prolonging the sound of each letter. When inhaling, imagine the sexual forces rising, ascending from the sexual glands through the pair of sympathetic nervous cords, Ida and Pingala, reaching the brain, then afterwards continuing towards the heart. When exhaling, imagine the sexual energies entering the heart and even penetrating more deeply, reaching the consciousness in order to awaken it, striking it with force, with telema, willpower, thus combining the thorn and movement runes. Afterwards, pray and meditate. Beseech the Father who is in secret, asking him to awaken your consciousness. Beseech your Divine Mother Kundalini, beg her with infinite love to raise the sexual energies, to make them reach the heart and even further, to the very depth of your consciousness. Love and pray, meditate and supplicate. Build faith like the grain of mustard, and you will move mountains. Remember that doubt is the beginning of ignorance. Ask, and it shall be given to you. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. All right, well, that was the end of our summary. Now we're going to jump into today's material. All right, there's a fair number of comments there, but not a question. So, we're going to keep it moving. Rita Rune, the 5th rune. Rit, Rita, Rad, Rod, Reid, Rota. Fischbach, 1900. The creation of fire by 2 pieces of wood, a wooden stick and a wooden plate, was considered to be the most sacred, probably because it was also the oldest way. But more convenient was wheel rotation around an axis in order to start the fire by rubbing. This fire wheel was important for all dwelling places. So he's talking about, he doesn't have a diagram in the book, or at least not that I saw, but he's talking about having a little setup where you have like a plate and then a stick, and then the stick is hooked up to some kind of mechanism where you can walk around in a circle or move it with your hand and spin it in a circle, instead of, for the Fa rune, it had the straps that you pulled it back and forth, but this is more like if you look at the shape of the rune, that the circle is the upper part of the rune, and then you kind of like push it around and the whole thing moves and makes a circle. And this would cause the stick to spin and then create fire. We find in some of the oldest settlements many villages with the designation wheel, which is Rad, R-A-D in German. There they also gathered together for consulting as a people's wheel. From that form of religious worship, it is known how many spokes the wheel had to have and how many men turned it alternatingly. Probably the turning was done through straps, as was done with the fire drill, for a faster turnaround. So maybe instead of pulling the stick back and forth, the straps were attached on different sides, and then you walked around or ran 2 people minimum on each side, or on one side and then the other. But if you had 4 or more, it would probably be easier, and then just everybody would be walking around. This would spin it, or maybe run. Strange is the similarity of this rune with Thor's pickaxe, right? The 3rd rune, Thorn. Since in the Thor Donar, the R is strongly emphasized, as well as in his name, Roland. The rolling of the wheels makes a sound. So we may conclude that the 3 runes Thor, Dorn, Os, Othil, and Rita, were dedicated to Thor. Thor drives in the big heavenly chariot around the North Star. That the Reid rune did not designate the chariot wheel, but at first only the fire wheel, is clear. But the poetry of the Skalds gave these runes a very wide scope. So he's associating it with the fire wheel, and that wheel with community. Guido von List, 6-7 years later. Reith, Wrath, Ruoth. Rita, or cosmic law. Wrath, red, wheel. To clear, to soften by soaking in water is called to ret. To prepare with water. Right, another R word. A fifth I heard when in cheerful flight a projectile flies into the flock. No matter how swiftly it flies, I force it to stand still. I seize it with my gaze. The thrice sacred Rita, or cosmic law, the solar wheel, the ur-fire, the primordial fire, divinity itself. The exalted inner feeling, or introspectiveness, of humanity is the consciousness of one's own divinity. Very interesting sentence that's not easy to translate. The exalted inner feeling or introspectiveness of humanity is the consciousness of one's own divinity. Because introspection is just being with oneself. And being with oneself is being with God. Genuine people of nature, Naturvolk, are not people who are in a state of savagery, because those people live in the shackles of the most horrible shamanism. On the contrary, the genuine people of nature already require a high cultural level, but free from all and every excess culture, since they still possess their whole original unclouded introspection. This is made obvious when one is unable to find one's God in one's innermost being, and so one begins to look for this outside of oneself, and in the outside world, up there in the starry heavens. The less inward the human being is, the more outward their life becomes. And the more a people lose their introspection, the more pompous and ceremonialized their outward manifestations become, especially in the character of their administration, law, and forms of worship. However, genuine people of nature should be one in recognizing, I know what I trust, and that is why I am living it out. Innate divine introspection is, therefore, the basis for an impressive defiance of death and for an unlimited confidence in God and in self. This expresses itself brilliantly in Rita, the cosmic law, and which has the 5th rune as its symbol. Therefore, this rune says, I am my rod, R-O-D, which means my right or my law. This rod is invulnerable. Therefore, I myself am invulnerable, because I am my rod. So, we're going to see what the other authors say because they sort of try and explain this. But the main ideas are he's giving some new words, Rita and Rod. But he's talking about how if we're not allowed to look inside, if we're not able to look inside, or if we don't look inside, then we end up looking outside. And if God is inside, then we need to have that introspective ability. And when we can find that, then we can find that guide within. And that's our right. Exoterically, it means, according to Kurtzahn, 15 years later, a little more than 15 years later. Hold on. Exoterically, he says it means rot, rat, advice or counsel, strength, and this word Roth, which he hasn't defined yet. Esoterically, it means Rita, which he says means the divine right or right, the law, the primordial right, primordial law, something that's inborn, right, that we don't need to get from somewhere else. Generally, it means advice or counsel, right, Roth, which is probably the same as Rod, because TH and D could be swapped out in runic Kabbalah or Kala. And he says in general it also means wheel. This rune is of particularly profound meaning. Rita, Rit make up part of the word ritual. Rita is the right, that which is inseparably connected with the unity of science and religion, in the sense of reconnecting with the divine cause, the origin, the divine origin. Here by the term right is primarily meant what is born with us and which in life is unfortunately almost never spoken of. Thus the eternal right, which hangs above so-called inalienable rights. This divine right, this divine strength, has always been based on introspection. Introspection gives science and religion the strength that allows us to survive decades of adversity, remaining victorious despite everything. It seems almost as if the Hebrew word for law, Torah, is a kind of anagram of Rita, with the substitution of the I for the O when written anagrammatically on the screen. We have it. So Torah, this is something Eliphas Levi wrote. He had it in a circle, probably 50 years before this, maybe more than that, a Frenchman. But many who studied the tarot, and Kurtzahn was one of them, for sure, because he wrote a book on tarot, are familiar with this shape. So the idea is that it's Torah, meaning the law, and tarot in the same symbol. So here he's trying to do Rita like that. Rita. He says, from Torah we receive tarot, referencing that philosophical system borrowed from the secret Egyptian service or temple service. And from Rita we receive tarit, related to the ancient word tarisk, meaning I demand an answer, which is the question being justifiably asked by a defendant. Tarit is similar to the tarot, and we're entitled to use it for our divinations and prophecies of the future, that is, casting of lots by runes, just as the Egyptians were with the tarot. The Tarit is based upon the sacred runic alphabet, the Futhark. However, instead of Tarit, we favor the beautiful sounding word Rita. If the practitioner has reached the real consciousness of their own divinity in themselves, then they are indeed able to bring a spear projectile to a standstill with the gaze, as is mentioned in the rune song. Gorsleben. Letter R and the number 5, about 6 years later. The Rit Rad or Richit rune, the resting head of the talking horse, Gauta Tir, the creative word of God, which makes the world of space into the image of the divine rhythm. Let's remember that the previous rune was the unborn word of God, the breath. This one, he says, is the creative word of God. Now the God is creating. Dr. Friedrich Teltscher's Ur-word is, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, Verfließendes, meaning that which is passing, as well as elapsing and passing by. This I know as a fifth. If in hostile flight an arrow shoots into the crowd, no matter how brightly it rattles, I block its power by grasping it tightly with my eye. Writ, counsel or advice. Right, red, wheel. Roth, cruce, rad cruise, or the wheel cross, symbol of God's court, the cosmic law. Rota Torah, the original law. This rune expresses the rolling movement of the wheel of the sun, and tells us, I am my red, my advice, my counsel, which is rat, my right, my law. This right, my own advice, my own counsel, is inviolable. Therefore, I myself am inviolable. It is the Rota Rita, the religion, connecting back to the divine. This is the right to connect with the origin, with the divinity. So Rita and Rota, according to what they're trying to define here, mean the right to connect with our inner divinity. Connecting back to the divine, in contrast to the relics, that which are from this earth, that which has been left behind. In the ancient initiations, their religion was science and law in one. This rune is the right, the law, the raud, the advice or counsel to oneself, of which Goethe says regarding this, as for the law or the right that is born with us, alas, none careth to discern or investigate it. So what does that mean? We have an inborn, right, born with us, an inborn right. And we need to investigate it. We need to be introspective to connect with it. All true culture is based on an unwritten, blood-rooted right. And all laws are ultimately made for the purpose of doing away with this primordial right. Very interesting. Any law, he's saying, that's made, its purpose is really to hinder us from connecting with that inherent, inborn right. This occurs in cases when people want to turn injustice into law as a result of a conscious or unconscious deviation from this original right. This divine right, Raud, wheel, one's own advice, the origin of one's own sense of what is right or interior right, is independent of any external form or definition. Rita, Rit, is the Ur word for ritual, and the word Torah or Torah is Hebrew for law. Right? You can see here he's repeating some of the previous author's stuff. Thus, the law of Thor is the inversion of the word Rota or Rita, and in this case, also of the concept Rota, Rot, meaning right or law. It is the same word tarot, which has been handed down to us from the Egyptians, the Bavarian Tarok card game. In the Zend language, it is Tarisk or Tarit. Tarit is an inversion of the word Rita or Rota, the wheel, which was always the symbol for the right or the law. Therefore, Rod, the wheel or the color red, is always part of powers of justice, including that of the executioner, who breaks the criminals on the wheel and destroys them with the wheel, the law that they violated. The runes are older, much older, more original than even the tarot cards, and thus all casting of lots, pulling cards, all divination goes back to the runic Futhark in our sacred rune alphabet. Knowing that all language, all culture, all human divinity flows out of our ancient inner source, we become conscious of our own divine spiritual plenitude of power, and then we are indeed able to banish the spear of materialism by grasping it with the gaze of the spirit, as the stanza of the poem tells us. Everything that circumscribes or circles around something and that expresses movement with the rotating spiral-like development, a range, row, or set in general, succession and overlapping, the rhythm, horseback riding, the rule, is vortex of the sun, the rhythm in general, up and down. Right, so he's trying to describe these things, something that circulates or moves around. The symbol of the R-Rune is, as we have said, the wheel, turning vertically around its axis. The sun wheel, the eternal course of the sun, and figuratively speaking, the straight course of the eternal natural law, the rota, rotation. The Reit rune has the numeric value of 5. According to the 5, the Rita, Reit, or Rota rune, the Fem court was called the 5. It's Fem or Vem. It's the other way of spelling it with a V. And the right hand with its 5 fingers was symbol of the law and of justice. In Egyptian hieroglyphics, the R is expressed by the symbol of the talking mouth, or by a head with a ritual headband, similar to the Odil, Othil rune. So remember that Os, the previous rune, was also, it meant mouth. But R is the talking mouth. The priest is the Ritter, the knight Ritter, or the one who lives and judges, Richtet, according to the Rita, the cosmic law, as well as the horseback rider, Reiter, the right-hand man, Richter, the savior, Retter, the hero, Rech, and the highly exalted one, the one who is upright. The meandering band pattern, which has an R right there, which is ritually used everywhere, shows the rhythmic horseback riding movement of the R. And when you ride on a horse, right, you bounce a little bit. You go up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And it represents the course of the sun. That is the wheel of the sun, as it is symbolically given, the route that the sun takes. Because our solar system moves around the sun, but the sun also moves around a central point. A combination of the hook, cross, or swastika with the meandering band pattern is represented on the back of an old silver coin from around 500 BC, showing the connection of these signs or characters with sun and procreation myths. In the Indian teachings, the path for the mastery of the physical forces is called Riddhipada, which is simply the horseback rider's path, Reiter Pfad. The knight's path, Ritterpfad. It is the Rita path, the rhythm path, that of chivalry, right? The Rita human, the just human, the right or just human, the rhythmic human, the horseback riding human. We'll see when we study the Ehe, or 17th rune, which is the horse rune, how this is related with Rita. The prayer of the first human was certainly dance. Out of the rhythm, out of the dance, out of the rotation of the world, the first ritual and the first system of worship originated. Everything within us and around us is turning, sun, moon, stars, and even our blood circulation. All stone circles, all labyrinths, were places of dance, where people emulated the dance of the sun, the dance of the worlds. Dance regulates also the Rita of the flesh, the build-up and breakdown or increase and decrease, procreation and death, rejection of consumed life substances. The Rita human is the one who should eat real right food. Rota-like food, sun-ripened foods, in order to continuously absorb new living vital substances, vitamins, nutrients, and therefore preserve eternal youth. The Rita, Rota, Torah, Tero is the law of auspicious, purposeful procreation, wisely followed by the ancients. This is life as movement, which gives the incentive to laugh. Friedrich Nietzsche, the poet of rhythmic thinking, rejoices in the innermost possession and knowledge of the meaning of this rune. He says, "Hail to whosoever creates new dances. Let us dance in 1,000 ways. Our art is to be called free, and our science is to be called happy." The Reit rune is composed of the Is rune and the inverted Sig rune. With this, it represents human victory over the lower self. And the last of our historical authors here, Siegfried Kummer. The R-Rune, Rit, advice or counsel, rat, the right, the wheel, the rod, red, Roth, the divine law, that which originates one's own inner counsel, Reit, Rita, Rota, the holy, inviolable, innate right. The rune of rights, justice, and righteousness, numeric value 5. The R-Rune expresses movement, rhythm, racing, running, riding, rolling, rubbing, rushing, talking, murmuring. Wheel, the rolling sun wheel, the cosmic rhythm, whisper, rustle, and so on. The sacred innate right, my advice or counsel, my right is inviolable. It is in me, Rita, religion, Rita, the procreation right, the law. The rune Rita, or Rit, is the symbol of the great ritual, the all right, or universal right, the internal unwritten right experienced within. The five-fingered hand, the right hand, the symbol of rights. The quintet right of the Vehamanen judges, who were a proto-vigilante tribunal system in Germany active during the later Middle Ages, based on a fraternal organization of lay judges called free judges. The people's right, the Vehem star, the five-pointed star. The upright pentagram, white magic. The knight or horseman, the Ritter. The hero, Rech. The savior, the right. Red, the color of the judge executioner. Symbol of the Rita Rune is the five-petaled rose. The secret fragrant right, the parable of the secrecy of the divine right that is kept in the heart, which acts but does not speak. So in the other one, there was speech. In the Os rune, the previous rune, there was speech, but it needed action. In this rune, there's action, but it doesn't speak. The demonic or inversion of the Rita Rune is unjustness, unholiness, predatory, revengefulness, disharmonious rhythm, black magic. The motto, he says, I am my own right and knight. I am my own right and knight. I am my own right and warrior. Or right and hero. Starting from the Ich rune position, now he's giving his exercises, body position, which is why we're studying him. Starting from the Ich rune position, which is heels together, military at attention, the practitioner places the left hand on the left hip, creating an angled left arm. The left leg is also extended to the same side to make the shape of the Rita Rune position. Its sound formula is Ra, Re, Ri, Ro, Ru. For the R, the Rita Rune position, above all, the practitioner must have control of the physical forces and activation in the cosmic world rhythm. Whosoever takes possession of this rune internally will always be able to preserve eternal youth. And he gives a hand exercise. The Os rune, if you remember, was the thumb and the pointer finger together, and then the three other fingers were behind the pointer finger. In this one, they come down around the knuckle of the thumb. The rune practitioner should take up the Ich rune military position, military at attention. This is followed by a deep breathing exercise 3 times with thoughts directed towards physical and spiritual purification. which must be observed with all the other rune grips. Now raise the left arm up vertically. The left hand takes the position of figure 5, representing the Rita Rune grip. One purrs the R siren-like with good deep breathing, rising and lowering the sound. Right? You don't have to do it that fast. You can do it slower. One's inner thoughts are directed to higher advice or counsel, to one's innate right, and to the cosmic rhythm. Each rune grip must be repeated for 3 times, 3 minutes each, followed by a short pause in the Ich rune position between sets, since otherwise no satisfactory collection of subtle forces can be reached in the hand centers. This rune grip produces a rhythmic warning of the hand and enables activation to the cosmic world rhythm, whereby the higher centers are strongly stimulated and the magical abilities unfold within the rune practitioner. I'm not sure what that means. Activation into the cosmic world rhythm. Very interesting. Here too, a conscious willed circulation through the whole body should not be forgotten. As he says at the end, after you do this for a certain period of time, to then circulate the energy within yourself. As the astral color vibrations, Kummer was able to observe whitish yellow, pink, fire red, and orange. Further sound formulas for the Rita Rune are Ra, Re, Ri, Ro, Ru. All right. We've made it to the material that we want to cover, that we've been looking forward to, the Rosicrucian and Gnostic section. The Rita Rune according to Huiracocha. Let's see what he has to say. Beloved disciple, with the torn, or thorn runes, we have wounded and dominated the animal impulses. That is to say, we have imposed ourselves upon ourselves. We have made ourselves into our own owners and lords, in order to be able to manage the willpower. Because the movement rune or Olin rune, Os and Othil, has given us the great magical impulse. Remember that impulse comes from transmutation, learning to manage that. If we have accomplished all that the previous runes have demanded of us, then indeed our magical energy has been permeated with all the impulse of that Olin movement through the door of the mysteries of the supra-physical world. We should not, therefore, remain at the door of that sanctuary. But what is it that we are missing in order to go forward? We're missing the law. The occultist knows that God is the law. Divinity is the law. The rune of the law is Rita. Rita has left its philological value in the words reason, wheel, religion, red, Recht, German meaning right or law, a right which tells us what the Nordics meant when they spoke of Rita, rite, ritual. Today, the law is a conjunction of articles. The dictionary, as the first concept, gives a good definition as follows. So this is the dictionary definition of law. A rule and norm which is constant and invariable for things and phenomena born of the first cause or of their own qualities and conditions. And it still goes on to say, in the second sense, precept dictated by the authority in which a thing is commanded or prohibited in accordance with justice. Do we, the humans, know what justice is? No, not at all. There is only one, exclusively one, unique in itself, who is the one who knows what justice is, and that is God. It is God because He is law, justice itself, and the absolute, supreme source from which everything has sprouted. Just as the truth only understands the truth, so too does justice only understand itself. God, therefore, within ourselves, is the only one who must dictate what we must do or stop doing. Thus we must obey and we must listen to His directives alone, to His silent voice, to His imperative and tacit command. He will tell us in each case the last word when doubt corrodes us to our core. He will indicate to us with His invisible finger where the path is. If we deviate from it, then this means we want to march away from God by following the tortuous path of social prejudice. But then we work for society, for the conventional lie, for injustice, and it is necessary to labor for Him who is the pure and undefiled truth, which is supreme justice. Formerly, justice and its application as law was united with religion, and the priestesses in the Nordic forests cast the runes in order to know the plans of God, of the great All. Today we have defiled and lowered that divine right by putting justice into the hands of materialistic intellectuals, called judges and lawyers, and they are in charge of intertwining and entangling those human concepts and created political legislators. It is evident that the Rose-Cross fraternity obeys the authority and the laws of the country wherein each one is to be found, because it is a duty to do so. But we do not descend into baseness such as what is recommended by Krishnamurti in his book At the Feet of the Master. On page 23 of the edition translated into Spanish, where it says, "If you see that someone is breaking the laws of the country, you must inform the authorities." That which is accepted by the plan of the Theosophists as coming from Alcyone, we reject, because we consider it immoral and worthy only of someone of evil. No, absolutely not. It is not for us to judge a man by what others think of him who applies these human laws with dubious success. We appeal to the divine laws, and we condemn the informer who goes before an authority to accuse a fellow human being. This is for us a mean and a miserable person. The Nordic peoples celebrated certain periodic meetings called Thing. In the forest, the members of the Thing gathered, and each seat was adorned with roses. And when justice was applied, the rose was always the symbol of rectitude. The Roman law had the scale as its symbol, and the sword as the symbol of the imposed penalty. Thus the Nordic Rose Cross could not proceed in their courts except under the symbol of the rose with its 5 petals, because it is wild. He's talking about a wild rose. The Vium, or Vema, that secret court of the Westphalians, only gave the ruling by putting a rose as a seal in the protocols. In the Edda, one realizes that a rose garden always represents justice. With a certain magical ritual, the Rita Rune was united with the rose and made true justice proceed, arousing the internal conscience of the judges in order to proceed with strict justice in their decisions. Our divine being, God in us, is judging all our actions, and His mysterious voice, projected with profound truth from the depths of our cavern, is the one that listens with subtle ears for those who are prepared for it. The Nordics knew certain practices that the Romans called jungum, and the Hindus of the East gave it the name of yoga or yoga, and from it they formed the Purna, Tayaya, Laya, Mantram, Tantra, Karma, Dhyana, and Bhakti Yoga that we have experienced for years since Theosophy arrived in the West. Summarizing all these practices, what we find are nothing more than the degenerations of something primitive that can produce illness, degenerations, insanity, and premature death to the European who applies them incorrectly. For us, it is the Western Jungum that we will teach and that we are teaching. This is what corresponds to us, and with this we will awaken the divine powers within ourselves and leave the deceiving Hatha Yoga behind, with which nothing has been achieved, nor will anything be achieved. The Rose-Cross disciples who for years have had this preparation by reading the good theosophical works and have subsequently verified the practices of the Hermetic courses have their organism free from complex barriers and obstacles and can, with more clarity than others, hear that divine voice within themselves. Similarly, the practices of the Rita Rune will serve them in order to achieve a certain personal independence through which they must feel above human laws, intimately connected to their own divinity, who is no longer an entity that dwells transposing the dense veil of the clouds, but the law itself, the power, the light that blazes within them, being their only judge, their only Lord, their only guide and master. The numerical value of this rune is 5, and consequently, it symbolizes the 5-pointed star, and the syllables Ra, Re, Ri, Ro, Ru must be pronounced rhythmically. In the Fa rune, we need to raise our arms. In the Fa rune, we had to raise our arms. In the Ur rune, we opened our legs. In the Dorn rune, we put an arm on the waist. In the Os, Othil, or Olin runes, the legs were opened and the arms on the waist, and the arms were on the waist. And in the present runic exercise, we have to open one leg and one arm. And in this position, one must vocalize, pronouncing the previously mentioned syllables. Ra, Re, Ri, Ro, Ru. With these positions, one will see that the disciples are the runes themselves, just as they are written. The disciples who have done the great course have already felt all the forces of these runes in their vocalization practices. R.C. Rose Cross. That was the end of Huiracocha's letter on the Rita Rune. Now we'll read Samael and Weor. It says, in a previous existence during the Middle Ages, the one whom we now call Samael and Weor was living in Austria and was a member of an aristocratic family. His family was very conceited about matters of royal blood related with ancestry, and he too was engulfed within the bottle of those social prejudices. One day his sister fell in love with a very poor man, and this became a scandal. The ladies of the class of nobles scoffed at his sister, saying that she had disgraced the honor of the family, and that she could have married better, etc. Soon his poor sister became a widow, but the outcome of her love was a child. It was not possible for her to return to the bosom of her family because of the social prejudices of that epoch, and so she preferred an independent life. Feeling pity for his sister, he tried to help his nephew by putting him into a boarding school, by paying for the boarding school, but without taking into account the feelings of the boy's mother, his sister. He even committed the error of prohibiting the mother from visiting her son, thinking that in this way his nephew would become a great gentleman. The path which leads to the abyss is paved with good intentions. Many times when one is trying to do good, one accomplishes evil. How many times, when one is trying to do good, does one accomplish evil? His intentions were good, but his actions were mistaken. Nonetheless, he firmly believed that he was doing the right thing. His sister was suffering greatly because of the absence of her son. Clearly, there was love for his nephew and cruelty for his sister. However, he thought that if he was helping the son, then he would also be helping the boy's mother. Fortunately, the police of karma, the Kaom, K-A-O-M, emerge inside each one of us. Within those intimate regions where love is missing. Remember that love is the law. Conscious love. These agents of karma, the Kaom, exist within us and direct us towards the tribunals of the law. Many centuries have passed since then. However, the law of recurrence is terrible, because everything is repeated as it once happened, along with its good or bad consequences. In the 20th century, all the actors of that past event have returned again. Everything has been repeated in a certain way, but with consequences. This time, Samael own Weor was the one who was rejected by his family. Such is the law. The nephew was reborn again, but with a feminine body, a baby girl. While still young, the girl, his ancient nephew, fell ill with an intestinal infection. Many children of her age died of the same cause, and all the remedies were useless. In her face, the unmistakable profile of death was starting to show. So there was no other choice but to visit the dragon of the law, the genie of karma, Anubis. Right? On the Gnostic Egyptian tarot, it's the 5th card, the hierarch of the law. Thankfully, Samael and Weor had cosmic capital with which to pay his old debt, and therefore the girl was miraculously healed. With the possible death of his daughter, he had the same feeling of pain, the pain of detachment, the same bitterness, which in the past his sister was feeling for the loss of her son. Thus, by means of the great law, damage would be compensated with the repetition of similar scenes. When will all of the mysteries of the Rita Rune be comprehended? Certainly, this is the rune of the law. It is the rose that represents divine justice. Inside the palace of Anubis, scales and swords are seen everywhere. Scales like to weigh things, right? Balance plates. This great judge is assisted by 42 judges of the law, illustrious lawyers of the great law who defend us when we have enough cosmic capital in order to pay our old debts. Lawyers are never absent before the tribunal of karma. To get credit from the lords of the law or archivists of destiny is also possible, but must be paid with good deeds through working for humanity or based on supreme pain. Not only is karma owed for the evil that is done, but also for the good that is done. but also for the good that is not done. Not only is karma owed for the evil that is done, but also for the good that is not done. Practice. The fundamental mantras of the Rita Rune are Ra, Re, Ri, Ro, Ru. We must open one leg and one arm. The present runic practice has the power of liberating the internal judgment. We need to convert ourselves into judges of consciousness. It is urgent to awaken the Buddhata, the seed of soul. This rune has the power of awakening the consciousness of the judges. Let us remember what is called remorse, which certainly is the accusing voice of the consciousness. Those who never feel remorse are truly very far from their interior judge. People like this must work very intensely with the Rita Rune. Thus, this is how they will liberate their interior judgment. We urgently need to learn how to be guided by the voice of silence, that is to say, by the intimate judge. So that's the end of the material we wanted to cover today. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comments area for us. Very interesting rune about connecting with our that inner voice, that inner aspect of our divinity called in Gnosis the Kaum, the inner guide, inner judge, who helps us to know what to do. So that we can be victorious in our journey to return to the source, divinity. We doesn't look like we have any questions or comments. I know there's a little bit of a lag, so we got to wait for that. But hopefully we'll be able to make another class next Sunday and move on to the K-Rune. Very interesting rune, the rune of the expert, as the Germans say. Related with using the creative energy, the sword, and the woman, the spouse. All right, well, it doesn't look like there's any questions at this time. So with that, we'll shut it down for now. If you do have any, please feel free to leave them at the in the comments area, and we'll get to them when we can. If you don't want to put them on in the comments area, you can always email us, gnosticstudies@gmail.com. With that, we do want to thank you for your attention, for sharing your time with us. We hope that this has been beneficial. This is a very interesting rune, very helpful rune when you understand it. It's useful to do the practice when you can. Let's remember that whenever we do those rune practices, when we start, we always want to, focus on what we're doing and put away everything else and just focus on being present. Stand there in that military at attention or Ich-Rune position or Is-Rune position. Heels together, arms at the sides, relaxing. Tuck the chin, chest out just a little bit, and feeling the energy coming up or concentrating on the concept Energy comes up through the feet from the earth. Energy comes down through the heavens, through the head. And they mix in the center, in our chest, torso, there, right around the sternum, where the ribs come together. So if we do that, kind of bring ourselves there, ready to do the practice. So we recommend that when you're able, and it's not recommended to do vocalization practices and gnosis when a woman's on her cycle. So just keep that in mind too. But you can definitely meditate on the rune, pray. All right. Thanks again for your time and your attention, and we want to wish you the best in your esoteric work. Until next time.